They bring Zaynab bint Jahsh. Now this is a very interesting story. I'm not going to go into, we're going to go into it into more detail in a different story. But basically, Zayd ibn Haritha, who used to be the adopted son of the Prophet ﷺ, and then he wasn't, there's no blood connection between him anyway, okay, that he divorced a woman called Zaynab bint Jahsh. And then the Prophet ﷺ was told really by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to the hadiths, and the asbab al-nuzul of وَتُبْدِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِي in Surah Al-Ahzab, chapter 33, verse 30, which says that, and you concealed in yourself what Allah had exposed to you, that Allah exposed to him that you're going to get married to Zaynab bint Jahsh, but he didn't tell the people. Allah reprimands him for that in the Quran. وَتَخْشَى النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ حَقًّا تَخْشَى. And you fear the people, Allah is saying this to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you fear the people, and Allah is more befitting that you fear him. Al-Hasan al-Basri said that if there was anything that was going to be concealed from the Quran, it would be this verse. It's very embarrassing. The Prophet ﷺ is about to marry someone who is the wife of, in the society at that time, they considered it to be a big deal. Okay, he was your adopted son, how could you marry his ex-wife? How? Even now it's seen a bit weird, but it's not as weird as then, because there's no biological relationship. At that time, adoption was a big thing. So they considered that to be, at the time, it was a big deal. So much so the Quran says, وَتُبْدِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِي, that you conceal within yourself what Allah is going to expose. Allah saying, I'm going to expose it. And Hasan al-Basri is saying that actually, if there's anything that he was going to conceal about himself, it would be this verse. Tell me if this is not the criterion of embarrassment. So they use it to attack the Prophet Muhammad. They don't realizing that they're actually positively making a case for the preservation of Islam according to their methods. Vis-a-vis the principle of embarrassment. So this is an interesting thing. But when you apply it to Jesus and so on, what's really there to be embarrassed about? When you could say, okay, well, the principle of embarrassment, they need that stuff. We don't need this. We don't need this for the preservation of Islam. We have biographies of men, this person, where he was, where he lived, where he ate, what he done. We're going to accept his hadith based on this. Basically, he's got a criminal record. A DBS check has been done on all the biographies of men. And you're telling me about the principle of embarrassment? That's how you're going to tell me that the Bible is preserved? You're telling me about that principle there? That even if you employ it, then you're going to exonerate the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, not that, but you're going to make a case for the preservation of Islam according to your methods. Everything has a hikmah. You say, why did Allah allow such a thing? Why did Allah allow the Prophet to marry such a woman? What's the hikmah of it? Maybe this is one of the hikam. That so it can be a bolstered argument for the preservation of Islam according to their methods. They have other criterions which is quite similar. There's one called the criterion of dissimilarity, originality, or irreducibility. So it's quite similar, and they use the baptism of Jesus and stuff like that as, okay, well, because according to their theology, the one who's baptizing, who in this case was John the Baptist, is better than the one being baptized. They say, look, how could it be that Jesus is being baptized? It would indicate his inferiority, but still the story is told which indicates dissimilarity here. Do you see what I mean? But anyway, it's pretty weak in terms of historical. Let's be honest about this. And then, we know this as well, the principle of multiple attestation. It comes from different sources. And we of course have al-hadith al-aziz, al-hadith al-mashhur, al-hadith al-mutawatir, as everyone knows. Most hadith are not actually gharib. People think that a ahad hadith, which is a hadith supposedly narrated by one chain of narration, is only narrated by one person. That's not true. An ahad hadith, not ahad, but ahad hadith is divided into three. Al-gharib, al-aziz, and al-mashhur. And al-gharib has two or more people narrating the hadith. So the Shia attacked Abu Huraira and he said, look, why is he making all these hadiths? He's the most narrated person of hadith. How could he narrate so much hadith? So interesting, because if you use the principle of attestation or multiple whatever, what do they call it here? The principle of multiple attestation, yeah? If you use the principle of multiple attestation, even by the historical critical method standards, did you know that more than 95% of the hadith, and there's some studies that I can cite on this, that were narrated by Abu Huraira were narrated by somebody else? So it must have been some grand conspiracy. Because most of the things that Abu Huraira said, at least one other person said the same thing what he said. Because the false assumption is that he's saying this hadith by himself, but actually at each tabaqah there's two guys. It's gharib. It's not gharib, it's aziz. It's aziz or mashhur. 2 or 3 or more. Mutawatir even. So we're talking about multiple attestation. Now you apply this to the Bible, there's nothing in the first 100 years. So what they're compelled to do is talk about Q source and L source and M source and that source and all these sources in the 2nd century. So they're saying, okay, these are independent sources from each other. But how can you be sure that they're independent from each other in the first place? Because there's no chain of narration. When we talk about independence, we're talking about guys that live completely different place, different human beings, different biographies. And they have different, you cannot even employ their historical critical method. We have absorbed all of it. So tell me which is more critical. We're saying the hadith method is more critical than their method. Their principles of multiple attestation and principles of embarrassment and principles of whatever, dissimilarity, our ones are stronger. So why do you think you're being more skeptical than we are? We're skeptical of your skepticism. And moreover, not only are we skeptical of your skepticism, we employ all your methods of skepticism to reach even more staunch and stern conclusions about the veracity of hadith or lack thereof. And look at the historicity of Jesus Christ. E.P. Saunders, he wrote a book called The Historical Figure of Jesus. And he said that if you remove the Bible, you've got a figure of Jesus Christ that's a very, like, I'm paraphrasing, yani, but he's basically an obscure figure, yani, in Bethlehem. Yani, he's an obscure figure. You've only got, by the way, you've got 2 people that are oft quoted as figures that are outside the Christian corpus for the historical character of Jesus Christ. But we won't go into that. We can go into that maybe some other time. And one of them anyway is interpolation in his works, and the Christians tried to put the baptism and the crucifixion in there and stuff, and then it was seen to be a forgery. And even that, they're putting forgeries in there. Even the non-Christian sources, the Christians, they're doing tahrif not only of their own books, but the books of other people. They have no business with tahrif on it. They're corrupting, it's like, I'm corrupting my own Bible now. I'm going, no, to the Bhagavad Gita, corrupting that one as well. Why are you corrupting other people's books? Why are you corrupting? Because you want to force a theological narrative. Interpolation, anything to do with Christianity, I always hear the word interpolation and corruption. Nothing is preserved of their religion. Bits and bobs here and there. But look at the historicity of Moses. Now, many people will know that, if we go back to the idea of looking outside the Bible, there is a stele, this rock, and this one's actually in the museum, the Egyptian museum there. Look, we have something in our museum. That's a very important artifact. Now, it's dated 1213 to 1203 BCE. And in that stele, Merenptah, on the 13th line, it says the people of Israel, and they were expelled. And Merenptah was the son of whom? Ramses II. Okay, so this is scanty evidence, quite frankly. Scanty evidence. And there are about 4 steles with the words children of Israel on it. But that does show you it's not a myth. Because you can't tell me Gilgamesh and this one and that one now myth. Because now we're locating it in a time and place. Sorry to say. Don't tell me it's a myth. How is it a myth? Who forged the stela? Did someone come in there and put hieroglyphics and forge that one? But if it's not forged, and wallahi, and this could be a thing, a session by itself, wallahi, if you read, for example, there's a guy called Israel Finkelstein. He represents, not Norman Finkelstein, the one I spoke to about Palestine issue, no. There's another guy called Israel Finkelstein who represents the minimalist school in the historical thing. And they look at these steles and stuff like that. And there's another stele, because we know that David, he came after Moses, David and Solomon. And there's a stele called the Tel Dan stele. A very, very, very interesting stele. And it says in it, the house of David. Because before the minimalists were saying, and this shows you, the arguments for silence can actually backfire in your face in a bad manner. People like Israel Finkelstein and others from the minimalist school of historical investigation, they were saying, look, there's no evidence of David. There's no evidence of him. Outside the Bible, there's nothing. Then this stele came out to life, called the Tel Dan stele, which is a rock on it, with Hebrew language, and said the house of David. They translated that. He had to come back a bit and retract. There is evidence now, actually, for that. So there's evidence for Moses. There's evidence for David. Yes, there is. But if you look at the minimalist accounts and the reasons why, and this could be a thing by itself, wallahi, it's so unbelievable. The reasons why they reject the biblical narrative is because they say, for example, How could this many people from Israel go to Egypt? That would be an event that would be codified in other places. But the Quran says that Pharaoh, for example, says that that there were a small number of people. So if you look at the Quranic narrative and compare it with the minimalist accounts, you'll find that the criticisms that the minimalists use against the maximalists and the biblical narrative don't actually apply to the Quranic narrative, which is a whole layer of historical evidence for the veracity of Islam, which we can't go into now. But what I'm saying is that when you realize that these prophets were not myths, that's a very, very significant thing. You're talking outside of the purview of the Bible. This is extra biblical information. So we know now Moses existed. We know, okay, there's the children of Israel. There's steelers that say it. Let's talk about David. Let's talk about Solomon. But we also know that the accounts of the biblical discourse are faulty. But then when you compare, you're talking to us about the historicity of Muhammad, and these some Christians apologists actually make the point. Historicity of Muhammad. Compare the historicity of Muhammad ﷺ with any of the prophets that existed before him. Jesus, Moses, Abraham, nobody. There's too much evidence. And so with that, I think we've covered most, if not all, of this. Yes, we have covered everything. We have covered all of, how many hours was that? How long was it? Yeah, as I said, that's how they. Now we'll open up to questions, inshallah. Yeah. Yeah.
What if someone would argue that the one criticism of the hadith is that they accept the supernatural, while the historical critical method does not accept it, so they're more probabilistic than the hadiths?
And both scientific, or science and history, they believe in something, or they employ something called methodological naturalism. Yeah, so that what you cannot verify a supernatural event. It's historian's job is not to say this happened or this not happen. It's historian's job is to tell you what people said happened. That's his job. How does he know it happened or not happened? Think about it logically. If I wrote, I saw such and such, I saw a man levitate. I went this place, I saw a man levitate. Now, I wrote that journal, I wrote it, I put it down. I go to my psychologist, he said, look, were you taking a hallucinogen? I say, no, I wasn't taking a hallucinogen. I saw the man levitate. Was the man on strings? Was he a magician? Was this, was that? You can have whatever theory you like. But if I claim that a man levitated, you must accept that this is a testimony. So when we have a range of different things, you can have whatever theory you want about it, but the testimony is what we're looking for, not necessarily the interpretation of the testimony. So yes, there's a discussion there, but it's not the historian's job to talk about the possibility of a historical event or a supernatural event. His job is just to narrate what was said that happened, not what the interpretation of that might have been.
I just want to say the Exodus in the Bible is 600,000 people that left.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, which is a mind-blowing number, and a lot of historians said that figure is completely wrong.
Exactly, yeah.
Absolutely wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, especially the minimalist school, they will say, how is it that 600,000 people crossed the sea, and Moses split the sea in 600,000, what happened? And you're telling me that no one wrote this?
Yeah.
And there was only one line in the sea of Marampata? But the Quran says, "Shirdimatun qalilun." There were a small band of people, which makes much more sense. So the criticism that is levied at that particular kind of thing cannot be levied at the Quranic account.
I may have missed it in your talk, but I was going to say about the coins that you were talking about. You said that they had like Allah, His name written on it.
Yeah.
But didn't the Quraysh already believe in Allah before the Prophet ﷺ? So couldn't it be of that like?
The thing is, they believed in Allah, but they didn't have the formulations Lillah, Bismillah, like the Basmala and stuff like these are unique to Islam. Ar-Rahman and stuff, but I don't know if Ar-Rahman was in any of the coins. I have to look at Ar-Rahman if it's in a coin for sure. But that's one thing. But another thing is the following: is that they had other gods. So why is it only? We don't find Allah in any of them. We don't find a coin with Al-Uzza on it. And Al-Manat al-Thalith al-Ukhra. Why not a coin with Manat on it? Do you know what I mean? So that's actually a very good point, because it's not only what we find, it's what we don't find. Like we don't find coins with Manat on it, for example. Mm-hmm.